our next lesson, we'll talk about how to understand approvals. Specifically in this lesson, we're going to discuss contract workflow, responding to approvals, e-signature, and some post-execution actions. Let's talk about workflow. Here you can see a sample workflow that's been added to our training environment. Keep in mind that workflow is highly configurable and it allows you to route your approvals in a way that is specific to your organization's needs. This workflow that we'll talk about today is very simple, but it's often used as a starting point during implementation. Your workflow will probably look very different from this. In the first step of my workflow, we can see the step compile file. This is where the PDF file is generated from all of the data and attachments we have. This is that file that will eventually be signed and fully executed. It's an automated workflow step that everyone will have because everybody needs a file to sign, whether you're using an e-signature tool or doing manual wet signatures. The second step is ADW approval. This stands for Advanced Dynamic Workflow Approval, and the rules that have been configured for this workflow step allow us to drive who approves our contract based on different criteria that the contract meets. I only have one step here, but you might have several, or maybe even a lot. Your steps also might be called something more specific, like legal check or budget check, instead of just being called ADW approval. I named mine generically just so I could easily identify it for training purposes. After that, we have an e-signature robot that's going to check and see if e-signature is being used. And if the answer is yes, then the e-signature setup step will send the contract to the e-signature tool that's been integrated with our Contracts Plus solution, and it will acquire signatures. Finally, upload signed document is done either automatically by the e-signature tool once the signatures have been attained, or manually by a user if you're not using e-signature. With the ADW approval routing, all of these criteria can trigger a variance in workflow. So you can drive your contract workflow by contract type, custom data, the duration of the contract, if the contract is confidential, if there's changes to a clause. There are many, many things that can determine the path your contract takes in approval workflow. You can see that this is very flexible. To get the contract approved, we will send out an email to our approvers. The email will look something like this. There's a link to view the contract or just a button to approve it right from there. The language of this email is configurable, just like our external review email. You can also opt to get notifications within Contracts Plus. You can also increase your efficiency and approve through the mobile app. You can stay up to date on your notifications and action items. You even have the ability to read the whole contract from your phone and download attachments. This can help reduce cycle times and just allow for mobility across the entire suite. Remember that we have the option to use e-signature on the contract header. If you do select yes, then it creates a new screen on the left-hand side where we have to identify our signers as well as their order. The e-signature integration does need to be set up and configured before these options are available. After the contract is approved, it would automatically be sent to the e-signature tool to obtain the necessary signatures. Once the approvals are done, if you are using e-signature, the signers would get some emails from the e-signature tool. In this example, I'm using DocuSign, but keep in mind that this also works with Adobe Sign. Signers would receive two emails, one requesting the signature, and another email when all parties have signed, with a PDF of the fully executed signed contract. DocuSign or Adobe Sign would bring that signed contract back into the Contracts Plus solution, so if you're using e-signature, you don't have to manually upload the signed document. The status of the e-signature is tracked on the e-signature screen of the contract, and if you click the little eye icon, you can see when your signers have viewed and or signed the contract. Be aware that if you ever need to recall or reset the signature process, the solution can accommodate that. So if you've submitted the contract for approval, then you realize you need to change or edit a signer, you can select Reset Signature Process from the Contract Actions dropdown. This will temporarily stall workflow and allow you to check out the contract for e-signature changes. If the DocuSign or Adobe Sign emails already went out, the signers would get another one that says the envelope was voided. Once you've edited your signers, you can check the contract back in, or select an option to restart signature process if you want to kick that off again immediately. DocuSign or Adobe Sign will then send new emails to the signers. So this will just allow you to make changes to your signers without having to start the entire workflow all over again and obtain approvals within your organization. We're going to jump back into the solution now and perform some approvals. We're going to not use e-signature today so that I can show you how to manually upload the signed document. Okay, so now that we completed our review rounds, we can move to the next screen, which is Submit for Approval. We can see here on the left-hand side that I've got all green check marks, which means I've completed everything I need to complete. That's also verified here at the top of the Submit for Approval screen. All sections are complete. I can submit my contract for approval. If I was missing anything, it would tell me what I was missing there. And here I can see that workflow. This looks similar to that sample workflow I was showing you in the presentation. It's very simple. We're going to just go ahead and submit for approval. We can enter a message for our approvers. I'll just say, please approve. It's not required. There's no asterisk, but we'll go ahead and do that anyway. And now it was submitted for approval. We can go view the contract. The status is now pending approval, and I can navigate to the approval screen to see where we are in workflow. So the compile file step already happened automatically. And now we are in this ADW approval step. And if I click on view approvers, I can see what the group is, legal check, and also who those approvers are. So because this was submitted from the legal work group, Grace Appleton and James Black are my two approvers. Remember that I'm logged in as Grace Appleton today, and that's not very realistic, but for training, I do want you to see what it's like to be the approver as well as the contract manager. We'll just say now I'm switching hats. I'm going to be the approver, Grace Appleton. Grace gets a notification. She also might get an email, depending on how her notification preferences are set up. And from that notification, she can see the summary and go to the contract. She can view the contract, take a look at the main document. If we go to the approval screen, we can see again where we are in workflow. And then from contract actions, she has a couple of choices. She can assign it to herself first so that James Black or the other approvers know that she's got it and they don't need to take any action on it. That's best practice. Or she can go ahead and approve it right from there. So we'll do that. And we can see now that that ADW approval step, Grace Appleton approved it. The next step is Signature Robot. We're checking to see if we are using e-signature. And in this case, we're not using e-signature, but our status of our contract changes to out for signature, and the last step of workflow is to upload the signed document. Now, if we were using e-signature, we wouldn't have to do anything else here. DocuSign or Adobe Sign would go out, retrieve the signatures, and then bring the contract back in for us so that it would move into the executed status automatically. We wouldn't have to touch anything. But because it requires a few more steps if you're doing it manually and not using e-signature, I wanted to make sure to demonstrate how to do that. So let's say that I got the signatures, maybe I've sent them in the mail, or I walked the contract down to the office of the people who needed to sign it. And then after I obtained the signatures, I scanned a copy into my computer and I'm ready to upload it here. What I would do is go to Contract Actions, Upload Fully Executed Contract, and then I would select the file. I'll go ahead and save my changes. And then that completes the workflow. Notice our contract status is executed future. It's going to be in effect soon. I know that our start date was today, but it's just going to take a moment to confirm that that start date has passed. If our start date wasn't for another couple of weeks, we would stay in this executed future status until that start date was reached. But in this case, we're going to let it take a moment, and then we'll eventually refresh and see this status change. There we go, executed in effect. And also I want to point out that now our contract is visible to Veridian Dynamics because an administrator would have indicated that executed in effect was a contract status that would be able to be shared.